Welcome to your journey into sleep. I will be here to help you relax and drift into a deep and peaceful sleep. And this is the Bedtime Story Space, where every story is like a gentle breeze, washing away all the noise and bringing peace to your mind. Now find a very comfortable position. Close your eyes, relax your shoulders, and let go of all thoughts. Let tonight's gentle story guide you to sweet dreams and immerse you in a deep sleep. And now, let's listen to tonight's story, Stargazing in the Desert, the story of my friend Amelia. Amelia once said, "There are moments in life when you feel as if you're standing outside of your own existence, watching it drift away quietly, distantly, as if every sound has been swallowed by an invisible space. That moment," she said, "is when the soul begins to find its way home." She left London on an autumn morning, when the city was still damp with mist and the buildings lay hidden beneath a thin veil of gray smoke. No loud farewells, only a small backpack, a few notebooks, an old camera, and a ticket to Jordan. Amelia said she wanted to go somewhere with no ticking clocks, no ringing phones, no rushing crowds, a place where the sky could touch the heart. The flight took nearly 8 hours across the Mediterranean Sea, through dry clouds and sunburnt lands. When the plane descended into Aqaba, she saw a field of golden light in the distance, the place locals call Wadi Rum, the legendary red desert, where sand meets the sky in absolute silence. Amelia rented an old car with a local guide named Rashid. He was a quiet Bedouin man, his eyes dark. As night, his smile gentle. As the car left the last paved road behind, the world around her slowly vanished. No more houses, no more trees. Only sand, stone, and wind. She rolled down the window, letting the desert wind pour in, carrying the dry scent of earth and the warmth of the sun. The sand rose in waves, sunlight glimmering like melted glass. Sometimes Rashid pointed toward the horizon, where cliffs stood tall like the cities of gods. The Bedouin believe these lands are guarded by the spirits of the wind, he said in a deep, Arabic-accented English. Amelia smiled. She didn't reply, but something inside her stirred, as if the wind truly saw her, calling her name across the sea of sand. When the sun began to set, they stopped in a flat valley between two crimson cliffs. The sky deepened into violet, the last streaks of clouds fading like thin smoke. Rashid pitched the tent, lit a small fire. Amelia stood still, watching the sun disappear. In that moment, it felt as though the entire world was holding its breath. She opened her notebook and wrote her first words. "Today I left everything. Familiar behind, the city, the work, the people, all of it here. There is only me and the wind. I don't know what I'm looking for, but maybe it's silence." That night, while Rashid slept beside the fire, Amelia sat outside the tent, gazing upward. For the first time in her life, she realized the sky was not black. It was alive, filled with countless stars. like millions of tiny candles burning in quiet harmony. She exhaled softly, her breath melting into the wind. This, she thought, this is why I came. From far away, it was as if the desert answered her through the whisper of the wind, the cool air across her skin, the slow rhythm of life moving unseen. That night, Amelia did not sleep. She just sat there, surrounded by the ocean of stars, letting every thought fall gently into the sand, and in that moment, she was no longer the one who left the world. She became a part of it. When dawn came, Amelia was still awake. She had been sitting there through the long night, watching the stars slowly fade, one by one, until the horizon began to breathe a faint silver light. The air was cool and sharp, the kind that tastes of dust and promise. Somewhere in the distance a camel groaned, and the sound echoed through the empty valley. Like the voice of time itself, Amelia stood up, stretching her arms, her body slightly sore from the chill. The sand beneath her feet was cold, smooth, and endless. She turned toward the east, where the first line of sunlight spilled gently over the dunes, painting the world in gold and rose. It was a sight so silent, so sacred, that she found herself holding her breath again. Rashid emerged from the tent, wrapped in a long scarf, his eyes half closed. From sleep, he looked at the rising sun and said quietly, "The desert wakes slowly, like a prayer." Then he smiled, offered her a cup of tea, and sat beside the fire. The tea smelled of mint and smoke, simple, pure, and grounding. They didn't speak much. Words felt unnecessary. Around them, the desert was awakening. The wind carried whispers. Grains of sand danced in tiny spirals, and a soft hum seemed to rise from the earth itself. Amelia closed her eyes, listening, really listening, and for the first time she realized that silence was not empty. It was full, filled with hidden voices, with the pulse of life moving quietly beneath everything. Later, that morning, Rashid took her for a walk across the dunes. Each step sank softly, leaving only fleeting footprints. He taught her how to read the sand, how the smallest ripple could tell the story of the wind. He pointed at faint tracks and said, "That was a desert fox. It passed here at dawn." Then he smiled again. "The desert remembers every step, even when we forget." Amelia listened, her heart absorbing every word. She began to see the world differently, not as empty, but as alive, ancient, breathing. Every shadow, every breeze, carried a memory older than humankind. At noon, they rested in the shade of a massive rock, its surface warm like skin. Rashid told her stories of travelers who lost their way and were found by the stars. He said, "If you ever forget where you are, look up. The sky never lies." Amelia looked up, and though it was bright daylight, she could still imagine the stars waiting behind the blue, silent, patient, eternal. As the day stretched on, the heat deepened, the air shimmered. Amelia felt the desert pressing against her, not harshly, but like an embrace. She realized She was no longer thinking about the city, or the noise, or the life she had left behind. Her thoughts were lighter now, dissolving into the rhythm of the dunes. When the sun began to set again, she sat quietly beside Rashid, watching the light turn from gold to amber, from amber to crimson. She whispered, almost to herself, "It feels as if time has stopped." Rashid looked at her, his face glowing in the fading light. "No," he said, "time doesn't stop. It simply breathes slower here." That night, as stars returned to the sky, brighter than before, Amelia wrote in her notebook, "Morning in the desert feels like waking. Up inside a dream, where silence speaks and every breath reminds me that I am alive." And once again she sat under the infinite sky, feeling the earth turning beneath her, feeling the wind pass through her hair, and she wondered if perhaps the desert wasn't a place at all, but a mirror, showing her the quiet truth she had always carried within. The second night arrived quietly, like a secret, slipping through the air with the scent of cooling sand. The heat of the day was gone, replaced by a deep calm. Above the horizon, the first stars appeared, faint and shy, and Amelia knew this was the night she had been waiting for. Rashid sat by the fire, humming something ancient, a tune that sounded like the wind itself. Amelia moved a little farther away, wanting to be alone with the sky. She carried her notebook and walked until the light of the fire was only a distant glow behind her. The sand was soft beneath her feet, still warm from the sun. The air trembled with quiet, the kind of silence that isn't empty, but full of invisible stories. She lay down on her back, her arms spread wide, and the stars, oh, the stars, they were everywhere, not scattered dots, but rivers, oceans, galaxies flowing above her. So close she felt she could touch them. Her heart slowed, her breath soft. It was as if the entire universe had drawn near, breathing with her. Gently, endlessly, she whispered, "How many lives have these stars watched over? How many dreams, how many souls have looked up and felt this same wonder?" Her words vanished into the wind, yet she felt they were heard. The desert had a way of listening. A shooting star crossed the sky, burning bright for a heartbeat, and Amelia smiled. Everything is temporary, yet somehow eternal. She wrote, "Even a falling star leaves light behind." Far away, Rashid's voice floated through the air. He was telling stories to the fire about constellations, about the travelers who once followed the stars across these sands. The Bedouin, he had told her earlier, "Do not fear the night, because the stars always show them the way home." Amelia turned her gaze upward again, tracing patterns in the sky. She saw Orion, his belt clear and sharp. She found Cassiopeia, her throne shimmering faintly, and she remembered the stories her grandmother used to tell, the myths of gods and heroes. But tonight she didn't see gods. She saw light, endless, patient, ancient, and in that light she felt her own heart, beating slowly, one with everything. Hours passed, though she did not notice. The night was too vast, too perfect. Sometimes she thought she could hear the stars, not with her ears, but somewhere deep inside, a low hum, steady and eternal, the sound of existence itself. When the wind rose, it brushed against her cheek like a whisper. She closed her eyes, and for a moment she wasn't Amelia anymore. She was sand. She was wind. She was part of the night later, when the fire had turned to embers. Rashid called her back. She returned quietly, her hair tangled, her eyes bright with reflection. Rashid looked at her and nodded, as if he understood without needing words. Amelia sat beside the fire and opened her notebook again. She wrote slowly, each word like a breath. Tonight, the desert taught me something. No city ever could. That peace is not the absence of noise. It is the presence of infinity. The flames flickered, the stars shimmered, and the desert, vast and eternal, seemed to cradle them both in its endless arms. That night, Amelia didn't dream, because she was already inside one. The night stretched long and silver. The fire cracked softly, throwing golden sparks into the cool desert air. Rashid poured tea into 2 small cups. The scent of mint drifted between them, sharp, sweet, grounding. Amelia sat with her knees drawn close, her eyes still heavy with wonder, her heart still somewhere among the stars. Neither spoke for a long time. Silence had become their language, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled, that simply existed, like the sand, like the night. Finally, Rashid broke it. "Do you know why I come here every month?" he asked, his voice low like a story that had been told too many times. Amelia shook her head. He smiled, not at her, but at the fire. "When I was young, I thought the desert was empty, a place where nothing grows, nothing lives." He lifted a handful of sand, letting it fall slowly through his fingers. "But I was wrong. The desert is alive. It listens. It remembers." Amelia watched the falling grains, catching the moonlight as they drifted away. "It feels like the stars listen too," she whispered. Rashid nodded. "They do, if you know how to speak to them." Amelia tilted her head. "And how do you do that?" Rashid looked at her, his eyes soft and distant. "You stop asking, and you start." Listening, for a while they simply breathed together, the rhythm of tea and silence, the fire's quiet heartbeat. The moon climbed higher, painting everything in silver. The dunes shimmered, smooth and endless. Like frozen waves of time, Amelia traced her finger along the rim of her cup. "When I'm in the city, everything moves so fast. People chase things they don't even see. But here, everything is slow, honest. It feels like the world is breathing again." Rashid chuckled. "The city forgets, but the desert reminds." He looked out toward the horizon. "In the city, light blinds you, but here, darkness shows you everything. His words lingered in the air, sinking into Amelia's chest. She thought of her life back home, her apartment filled with books and noise, the blow of her computer, the endless hum of traffic. All the things she once thought were important, and yet none of them had ever made her feel what she felt now. This stillness, this connection, this quiet truth. She said softly, "I think I came here to forget, but the desert keeps making me remember." Rashid smiled. "That's what it does. It strips you bare, and then shows you who you really are." The fire crackled. Amelia leaned back, her gaze lost again in the sky. The stars looked brighter now, as if they had drawn closer to listen. She whispered, almost to herself, "Do you ever feel lonely out here with only the sand and stars for company?" Rashid shook his head. "Loneliness is not being alone. It is forgetting that you belong to everything." His words sank into her like light into water. Amelia felt something loosen, something deep, quiet, unnamed. The kind of release that comes when you stop searching and simply exist. A breeze swept through the camp, lifting the corners of her journal, spattering a few grains of sand across the page. She caught it, holding it close. Her handwriting glowed in the firelight. "Peace is not found, it is remembered." She smiled. For the first time in a long while, she felt no need to run, no need to chase, only to be the moon hung high, silver and solemn. Rashid added more wood to the fire. Its light grew warm and alive again. "Sleep, Amelia," he said softly. "Tomorrow, the desert will show you something new." She nodded, but even as she lay down on her blanket, eyes half closed, she whispered one last thought into the night. Maybe the stars don't shine to be seen. Maybe they shine so we remember to look up, and the desert, vast and patient, whispered back in the language of wind and eternity. The morning came gently, without sound, only a slow bloom of light. Spreading across the dunes, Amelia woke to the scent of firewood and the faint taste of tea still lingering in her mouth. The sky was pale gold, endless, stretching wider than any thought. Rashid was already awake, sitting by the embers, his eyes fixed on the horizon. For a while, neither of them spoke. The desert didn't ask for words. It asked for presence. Amelia wrapped her shawl tighter, feeling the cool morning air press softly against her skin. She followed Rashid's gaze. The sun was rising, slow and deliberate, painting the sands in copper and rose. Each grain caught the light. Glowing like a small universe, Rashid finally said, "Every sunrise here feels like forgiveness." Amelia smiled faintly. "Forgiveness for what?" "For everything we forget," he replied, "and everything we never knew we needed to remember." His words stayed in her chest, quiet but heavy, like stones at the bottom of a river. She wanted to ask more, but the desert spoke first. A warm wind rose, brushing against her face, carrying whispers of something older than time, After breakfast, Rashid handed her a small flask of water. "We'll walk today," he said. "The desert teaches best when you move with it." They walked side by side across dunes that curved like waves frozen mid-motion. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was alive, breathing, listening. Each step left a mark, and yet, within moments, the wind erased it. Amelia watched as her footprints disappeared, as if she had never been there at all. It felt strange, but beautiful. The desert was teaching her the art of letting go, Rashid said softly. The sand doesn't mourn what it loses. It just becomes something new. Amelia nodded. In the city, everything leaves a trace, but here even the past gets carried away. They stopped at a ridge where the dunes opened wide into a vast plain. The air shimmered, a soft mirage of heat and distance. Amelia sat down, her heart full of quiet. Rashid placed a hand over his chest. "When the wind speaks, listen here, not here," he said, pointing first to his heart, then to his ears. She closed her eyes, and for a moment she could hear it. The low hum of life, the pulse of the earth, the same rhythm she had felt under the stars. It was everywhere, inside her, around her, infinite and invisible. When she opened her eyes again, everything looked different. The sand wasn't just sand. It was memory, movement, energy. The sky wasn't just blue. It was breathing, vast and alive, she whispered. "I think I understand," Rashid smiled. "No, you don't, but you will, and when you do, you'll stop needing to." They laughed softly, the kind of laugh that doesn't break silence but belongs to it. And the desert, endless and watching, seemed to smile with them as they walked. Back, Amelia noticed how every dune looked like a wave, every shadow like a whisper. She realized the desert wasn't empty at all. It was full, overflowing with meaning too big for words. That night after dinner, she wrote in her journal, her handwriting slow and steady under the glow of the fire. "Today, I learned that silence can speak, that erasing isn't forgetting, it's renewal, and that the desert in all its stillness holds every sound the world has ever made." She closed the book, and for the first time didn't feel the need to capture the rest, because some truths she knew now were meant to be lived, not written. "Before sleeping," Rashid said quietly, "tomorrow we reach the cliffs. They say if you listen closely, the wind there carries the voices of those who came before." Amelia looked toward the dark horizon, her heart steady, her mind quiet, and for the first time she didn't feel like a visitor. She felt like part of the desert, a breath among countless others, eternal and free. The next morning began with a whisper, a soft wind brushing against the tents, carrying with it the cool scent of stone and distance. Amelia woke before Rashid, the horizon still, pale, the world suspended between night and day. For a long while she just sat there, watching the sky slowly ignite, streaks of pink and silver flowing into gold. It felt like the desert was holding its breath, waiting, Rashid soon joined her, his steps quiet, his shadow long against the rising light. "Are you ready?" he asked. Amelia nodded. More than ever, they packed light, just water, dates, and a small bundle of bread. The cliffs were still hours away, but Amelia didn't feel the distance. Each step felt guided, as if something unseen was drawing her closer. The sun climbed higher. The wind shifted. Sometimes it sang, sometimes it sighed. It was no longer just sound. It was language, ancient, untranslatable, yet deeply understood. By midday, the sand began to change, turning harder, more textured. Rocks appeared, scattered like old bones of the earth. And then, at last, she saw them, the cliffs rising from the desert floor like sleeping giants, red and gold and endless. Rashid stopped walking. "This place," he said softly, "is older than memory." His eyes glimmered. "Listen closely. You might hear what most people never do." Amelia approached the cliffs, her fingers brushing their rough surface warm from the sun. The wind moved through the cracks and hollows, creating a low, melodic hum. It sounded like singing, like thousands of voices layered through time. She stepped closer, closed her eyes, and listened. At first it was only sound, a murmur, a rhythm, but slowly it began to take shape, a voice, not loud but deep, vast, infinite. It didn't speak in words, it spoke in feeling, in memory, in truth. It said, "You are not alone. You have never been alone. Every grain of sand remembers. Every breath of wind carries your name. You are part of the same story, the same silence, the same song." Tears welled in Amelia's eyes, not from sadness but from recognition. The sound moved through her, through her bones, through her breath. It wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was coming from within. She whispered, "I hear you." The wind swirled strong, alive as if answering. And for one eternal heartbeat, the world disappeared. There was no Amelia, no Rashid, no desert, only light, sound, and stillness. When she opened her eyes again, everything shimmered. The cliffs glowed like embers. The sand danced in tiny whirlwinds. The entire desert seemed awake, alive, alive. Rashid was standing a few steps behind, smiling gently. "What did you hear?" he asked. Amelia searched for words, but they felt too small, too heavy, so she only said, "Everything." He nodded, as if that was the only answer there ever could be. They sat in silence for a long time, the wind wrapping around them. Each gust carried a different sound, laughter, whispers, fragments of stories that might have belonged to other travelers. It was beautiful, endless, eternal. Amelia finally opened her journal, her hands trembling. She wrote, slowly, deliberately. "The wind has no voice, yet it speaks to every soul. The desert has no eyes, yet it sees into everything. Today I understood. That silence isn't empty, it's full of truth. And that when we stop speaking, The world finally begins to. When she finished writing, she didn't close the book. She left it open, letting the wind turn the pages, as if it, too, wanted to read. Rashid stood and began to hum softly, the same melody he had sung by the fire. It mixed with the wind, with the hum of the cliffs, with Amelia's heartbeat. And for the first time, she wasn't just listening. She was part of the song. The sun began to sink, turning the cliffs crimson, the sky a river of gold. Amelia stood, her face lit with light, her eyes calm, her breath steady. She turned to Rashid. I used to think peace was something I had to find. He smiled. And now? She looked out across the endless sands. Now I know. Peace was always here, waiting for me to be quiet enough to hear it. The wind rose again, warm and full, swirling around them like a blessing, and for a brief, shining moment, the desert spoke one last time, not in words but in a silence so deep it felt like love. The next morning came softly, the sky unfolding in shades of gold and rose. Amelia woke before the sun, her heart still humming with the echoes of the wind. For a moment she didn't move. She just listened to the silence, to her breath, to the soft memory of everything she had felt the day before. Rashid was already packing their things, his movements slow and thoughtful. The fire had burned out, leaving only a faint curl of smoke. The desert looked different now, not because it had changed, but because she walked a few steps away from the camp, letting the sand shift under her feet. The world was still yet alive. Every shadow and shimmer seemed to breathe. She turned toward the cliffs, now glowing with the first touch of dawn, and whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't just for the desert, but for everything, for the silence, for the stars, for Rashid, and for the version of herself she had rediscovered. When they began their journey back, the air was cool and filled with light. The dunes stretched endlessly ahead, their curves smooth like waves frozen in time. Rashid walked ahead, his robe flowing gently in the breeze. Amelia followed, her steps lighter than before. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Each step carried its own kind of conversation, wordless, ancient, true. As they walked, Amelia noticed small things she hadn't seen before, tiny flowers hidden in the sand, delicate and brave birds, tracing invisible paths across the sky. Even the wind felt gentler, like an old friend saying goodbye. At midday, they stopped for tea under a lonely acacia tree. Its branches cast trembling shadows on the sand. Rashid poured tea into 2 small cups, the same mint scent as always, but this time it tasted different, deeper, quieter, like something sacred had settled inside it. After a while, Rashid said, "You've learned what you came. For though you didn't know you were searching," Amelia smiled. "I think the desert teaches everyone differently." He nodded. "Yes, it gives each soul what it needs, not what it wants." She thought about that, and realized how true it was. The desert hadn't given her answers. It had given her silence, and in that silence she had found her own. As the sun began to lower, the dunes around them started to glow, each curve painted with light, soft and fleeting. They reached the edge of the desert by evening, where the sand began to fade into the rocky path that led toward the small town. Amelia stopped and turned one last time. The horizon stretched forever, golden, endless, free. She wanted to hold it, to never let go. But then she remembered what the desert had taught her: to let go, to trust, to breathe. She closed her eyes, inhaled the dry, sweet air, and whispered, "I will carry you with me, not in memory, but in the quiet between my thoughts." Rashid smiled, as if he had heard her even though she hadn't spoken aloud. "The desert never leaves you," he said. "Once it enters your heart, it stays, even in the noise of cities." They continued walking until the lights of the town appeared, small, distant, flickering like grounded stars. Amelia's heart tightened. A strange ache, a longing for something she was still inside of but already leaving. At the edge of the town, Rashid stopped. "This is where I go my own way," he said. Amelia looked at him, her eyes full of gratitude. "There aren't words big enough to thank you," she said. Rashid smiled. "Then don't. The wind has already carried them." They stood in silence, the kind that says more than any goodbye. Then he turned, walking back toward the open sands, his figure slowly dissolving into the golden distance, until there was nothing left but the desert and the wind. Amelia stood there for a long time, watching, listening. Then she turned toward the town, her steps calm, her heart still. That night, in a small inn by the edge of the dunes, she sat by the window. The air smelled faintly of dust and jasmine. Far away, she could still see the faint shimmer of stars, and though she was no longer in the desert, the silence was still with her, soft, patient, eternal. She opened her journal one last time, the pages now filled with words, sketches, and sand stains, and wrote, "The desert is not a place. It is a presence. It speaks in silence, teaches through stillness, and when you leave it, it follows, not to call you back, but to remind you that peace was never somewhere else. It was always inside, waiting for you to listen." She closed the book, smiled, and blew out the candle. The night wrapped around her, warm, infinite, alive, and the wind soft. As memory whispered one last time through the open window, "Welcome home." Months passed, yet the desert never truly left her. It lived quietly inside her, like a second heartbeat, a rhythm beneath her thoughts. London moved fast, the streets crowded, the noise constant. But somewhere within that chaos, Amelia carried a silence so deep nothing could disturb it. She returned to her work, her books, her endless city days, yet everything felt different, The same window where she once saw only gray skies now opened to endless light. The same rain she used to hurry through now felt like the earth breathing. Even the hum of traffic had a music she had never noticed before. Each morning, before she began her day, she would pause by her window. She would close her eyes, take a slow breath, and listen, and for a moment she would hear it, the faint whisper of wind through sand, the low hum of the cliffs, the sound of the desert, alive within her. Sometimes, when night fell, she climbed to the rooftop. The city lights shimmered, trying to outshine the stars, but she always looked beyond them, and there, faint but clear, the same constellations she had seen above the dunes, Orion, Cassiopeia, and the quiet path of the Milky Way. She smiled, because she knew now that no matter where she stood, the same stars watched over her. Her friends often asked, what was it like out there in the desert? Amelia would pause, her eyes soft, and she would answer, it wasn't the desert I found, it was myself. Would laugh, thinking it was poetry, but she knew it was the truest thing she could ever say. In her apartment on her desk sat a small jar of sand, golden, fine, glimmering whenever sunlight touched it. Beside it, her journal, its pages worn and filled with wind-swept thoughts. She never opened it anymore. She didn't need to, because she no longer needed words to remember. One evening, she sat by the window, tea in her hands, the air cool and quiet. She watched as dusk painted the buildings in amber and shadow. The city hummed, alive and distant, yet in her heart she was once again beneath that vast sky, lying on soft sand, breathing with a universe. She whispered, I used to think peace was a place, but now I know it's a way of seeing. Her voice was soft, almost lost in the sound of the wind outside, but she knew the desert heard her, because the curtain moved, the air stirred, and in that gentle motion she felt the same embrace, the same presence. She smiled, closed her eyes, and let the silence fill her. In her dreams the stars still shone, the dunes still whispered, and Rashid's voice still echoed faintly. The desert never leaves you. Once it enters your heart, it stays. Even in the noise of cities, Amelia breathed deeply, her heartbeat steady. The sound of the city faded, the wind returned, the stars unfolded, and somewhere between sleep and memory, she felt the desert once more. It was no longer far away. It was here, inside her, and as the night wrapped the city in its gentle dark, she whispered her final thought. The stars I watched in the desert, I now carry within. Wherever I go, I am never far from silence, never far from peace, never far from home. I once left everything I knew, the city streets, the noise, the rush, and I went to the desert, a place where silence isn't empty but full. The dunes stretched forever. The wind carried whispers older than time. And for the first time I saw the stars not as distant lights, but as mirrors of my own heart. The nights were alive with their glow. The cliffs hummed with voices of the past. I learned to listen, really listen, and in that stillness I found myself every grain of sand, every breath of wind, every star overhead. They became a part of me, and I a part of them. I returned to the city, but the desert came with me, not in the sand or the sky, but in quiet moments, in the spaces between thoughts, where peace isn't somewhere you find, it's the way you see. And I realized home isn't a place, it's the silence you carry within. So I look up at the night sky now, and the stars I watched in the desert I carry them with me always, and they remind me I am never far from stillness, never far from wonder, never far from peace.